Waters.
Senator.
Australia Infrastructure Facility. Thank you for your response to my question on notice. I didn't have a date on it, so I wasn't quite sure at what point in time that the NAIF had received just one formal investment proposal. So can you just explain to me, is that still the case? Have there been any other formal investment proposals?
The information I have to date, Senator, is there is one formal investment proposal at this stage. That means that it's gotten to a stage of due diligence for the board. I believe, and I might just need, there may be 13 others, is that right? Just looking at my officials. 13 other proposals that are at an advanced stage.
Okay, so there
discussion.
were 11 at the time, so that's
so there's a couple more.
Okay, carry on. When was the proposal, when was the investment proposal that's now at formal stage submitted?
Look, I don't have that information myself. Are there any officials that can help?
Senator Mike Lawson, Acting Deputy Secretary. There isn't a formal sort of date of submission process. It's when the board, the board would have met and decided to take that project through to the next phase of submission. So
how about we take that on notice?
So the date would have been the 10th of August.
It most likely would have been at a board meeting, I'd say, that they would have made that decision to take it. But we don't have officials here from the NAIF tonight. There is a new CEO that's been appointed last week, and so she hasn't started yet. She starts on Monday, I believe. It's Laurie Walker. But we'll help you out as best we can, and we can take questions on those.
Okay, thank you. All right, so roughly mid-August for when the board said it can go through to the next stage. But if you could check for me or take on notice when the original proposal was submitted, whether that was at EOI phase or whatever the first form, I can't remember the formal process, I think it's EOI, or you called for something or another.
I could perhaps briefly explain that. And some of this goes before I was Minister, so if officials need to correct me, please do so. But we did ask for expressions of interest when the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility was announced last year. Obviously, there was no board or facility established at that stage. The Expert Finance Insurance Corporation was assisting in that process. They were collated. The board has now been established, and they've obviously entered into more detailed discussions with proponents. I think, as Mr Lawson was explaining, my understanding, it's the board's prerogative to decide how it does this. There's not really a formal submission or application process. There's discussions that occur between the board, the NAIF officials and proponents, and they will advance through various stages as per the board's decisions.
Okay, so if you could just take on notice for me when that EOI was first put in by the proponent for the project that's now moved on to that next stage of formal investment proposal.
Sure, we can take that on notice.
Now, in the Quan, you said you couldn't give me any information about the specific project and the location or the cost, but is there anything that you can tell me about the nature of the proposal? Is it a transport proposal or an energy or a water?
Well, I'll take that on notice, Senator Waters. Obviously, the board, there's the sensitive information that the NAIF discusses with proponents, and they do ask proponents about the confidentiality that proponents would like to keep around these issues. So it's best I take that on notice and consult with the NAIF before coming back to you.
Okay, and if you could also please ask the board for those other 13 proposals that are now before the board. What I understand, you can't tell me the names or the precise costings, whatever, but the general nature of the type of development, as I say, is it infrastructure, is it
we'll take that on
energy,
notice.
what have you. Thank you. So at what point of the process will that sort of more detailed information about the precise proposals be put into the public domain?
Well, under the mandate we have provided to the NAIF, when investment decisions are made, they will publish those and some details about them. There is a process under the Act that is then entered into in terms of providing ministerial approval or rejection to any investment decision as well, and obviously that will be a public process.
So is it public when the board makes the investment decision or when the minister ticks off on it?
Well, I might just ask, just to clarify that.
So when the board makes its investment decision, 30 days after that it becomes public.
Okay, great.
There's also a process of the minister has, in a sense, a veto ability over that, and if should the minister decide to veto, that also becomes public. Within a certain number of days, we can.
That's in the Act, is it?
Sorry?
I can check that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all on the.
And is there criteria for when the minister can veto a proposal in
When
the Act?
or-
Yeah, if I
There's a
remember,
time frame.
I'll confirm, correct it if this is wrong, but I believe it's within 20 days of receiving the advice. I'll see if I can find
Okay.
the piece of paper.
Sure.
But that's all in the public material on the.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So are there any like eligibility criteria or parameters that the minister has to adhere to before he or she could issue a veto? And if so, are they just in the Act, in which case I can...
Yes,
look them up?
there are some criteria in the Act. We
And
can
are
give
there
you
any
those,
other
of course, as well.
informal guidelines, or is that the only place I will look to find those veto criteria?
Senator, there's the Act, and then there's a investment mandate that's been
Yes.
published.
Okay, so what the minister could veto on the basis that it's inconsistent with the
So
investment
those
mandate?
provide all the information about
Right.
the
Okay.
Senator, I believe, and we can very easily check that, I'm sure, the provisions of the Act, but I believe it goes to issues of national interest
Okay.
or otherwise.
Okay, yeah, thank you, that does sound familiar. So the transparency of the use of public money, it really only happens once that investment decision's been made. So there's no real visibility to the public about the use of public money until the decision to expend it is made.
Well,
was anybody
there's no-
concerned by that?
There's no formal process that I'm aware of apart from those. Decisions about what information is provided public obviously will be something the board will consider when requests are made. So the question I noticed that you've placed, Senator, that was obviously,
Okay.
I believe, I've received advice through the NAIF at the time. And likewise, questions we're taking on notice here. I'll go away and talk to the NAIF, and
Okay.
they will come back with advice about
So it would
what
be
they think can be
a
made
case-by-case
public
basis?
within the public interest.
Okay, so would that be decided on a case-by-case basis?
I'd have to ask the NAIF itself about that.
Okay,
Senator.
great. How many full-time equivalents have been assigned to NAIF at the moment?
Yes, Senator Mark Coffey, the head of the Office of Northern Australia. At the moment, there's an interim CEO that's on board until the 2nd of December. The permanent CEO, as the Minister stated, will start on Monday.
Could you say that last bit again?
The permanent CEO, as the Minister stated, will start on Monday.
Yes.
And I understand another staff member, a senior project originator, will also start on Monday. Otherwise,
Just those two people?
that's correct, but the department has also had staff in the Cairns office since that was opened in July.
Okay, how many full-time equivalents there?
And most of the work, and I think already EFIC, who's providing all the assessment and really the grunt work to support the CEO and the board, I think they've already allocated 2 dedicated teams.
Okay, so, sorry, EFIC has dedicated 2 teams?
That's correct. I understand 2 teams with a number of staff working with project proponents,
Yep.
providing support to the NAIF, HR support and
Okay.
other support.
So could you perhaps, if you don't have the figures, take on notice how many FTEs does that equate to? Whether they belong originally to EFIC or whether they will now belong to NAIF or to this department? Just a total FTEs that have been working on NAIF since its inception. And can I ask now about timeframes for assessments of proposals? We talked about the time after which an investment decision is made, that decision becomes public, but is there any sort of timeframe prior to that for how long it takes to assess a proposal?
Well, I believe, Senator, that will be a matter for the board to determine there are no formal instructions from the government that I'm aware setting timeframes.
Okay.
And that will really depend on the type of project and the complexity of the project.
Okay.
And the consultation that needs to occur, both with the relevant state and territory governments and affected stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. And is there a regular schedule of board meetings?
There are future board meetings planned. Mr. Coffey, are you aware
Yes,
of?
that's right. The next board meeting is late November in Darwin.
Okay.
That'll be the third board meeting since July, and there's a forward schedule of board meetings for next year.
And what's the regularity between those meetings?
I don't have them with me. We could take that on notice and
Okay.
provide that to you, but
Thank
at
you.
the moment they're meeting every couple of months.
Okay. And are there decisions that can be made by flying minute in between those formal board meetings, or does it have to be a quorum board meeting for a decision to be made?
That'd be a matter for the board, Senator.
Okay. All right, so just moving now to specific potential proponents, may or may not be one of the 13. Has anyone under the purview of NAIF, whether that's EFIC or yourself or your people that you've mentioned as working on NAIF, met with any representatives of any of the Adani group of companies or Mr Adani himself?
Yes, I understand that there has been some meetings between NAIF and Adani.
Okay, could you give me some more detail on those, please?
I don't have those details with me. We could take that on notice.
Okay, is there anything more you can tell me tonight?
No, because it hasn't been.
just don't have that.
It's been between NAIF and the company.
Oh, okay. So do you know whether that's been with which Adani company that's been with?
No, I don't.
Okay. And so, sorry, you're here representing NAIF, and you said the meetings have been between NAIF but not evidently you.
No, not quite. If I could explain,
Thank you.
Mr. Coffey's heads up the Office of Northern Australia.
Sorry, I
So that's okay.
misconstrued.
Yep. So he
Okay.
has oversight role of a number of
I see,
Northern
but you're not
Australian
NAIF
initiatives
per se.
based in Darwin, as Mr. Coffey. Normally, I'm sure we will have a representative from the NAIF directly here
Yeah,
once the
usually
permanent
they're here.
CEO
Okay.
is on board.
All right, thank you. We'll push on to the best as we can. I'm interested, perhaps this will have to be on notice as well, whether or not the Adani Coal Railway or the port or any associated water infrastructure to do with the mine had been discussed by NAIF and the Queensland Government, and if so, when?
Probably have to take that on notice,
Okay.
although in the interest of full disclosure, I am aware of the Queensland Government proposing to us to look at the project. I'd have to take on notice the component of the Carmichael Mine project that related to. That was in correspondence to the government last year.
Okay. Are you able to
Senator,
table
can I
that
just
correspondence,
also add,
Minister?
I think it's not an
Just, sorry,
easy...
just one sec. Would you be able to table that correspondence, Minister?
I'll take it on notice
Thank you.
and
Okay.
can come
Sorry,
back to you.
Secretary, carry on.
I was just saying that there's several number of inquiries and discussions. So the point they translate from discussions about an idea to a potential project
Yes.
is not all that clear. So sometimes we might have to seek, obviously the board and the CEO, whether the discussions also with the potential project owner, they want those sort of things disclosed, particularly at that early stage when they're thinking
Sure.
about it.
I understand
there's
that.
obviously a number of competitors in this space as well.
I understand that. I think for this particular project, the project's so well known and it's reasonably well advanced that
Sure.
probably that
Yes,
particular
Adani.
consideration
Okay.
doesn't
Yeah.
apply. But I accept that the
Look, and
concept
I accept
applies
that
in the
too,
general.
Senator. I've spoken to officials and representatives of Adani, and they're quite comfortable having in the public domain that they're interested in discussions with the NAIF. That is a matter of public record.
Yeah.
I don't have much more information than that. It's a matter for the board now
Okay.
to progress
Thank
those
you.
discussions.
Well, if you could please take on notice any amount of information that you can share as to the how far along the track those discussions have progressed, and whether that's
Sure.
one of the 13, if you're able to tell me that, or as much information as you can. Some other things, and sorry to belabor the point again, perhaps this will have to be on notice. I'm interested if the Queensland Government has ever expressed any specific support for the project. You mentioned there'd been that correspondence perhaps since then, has there been any particular statements of support? I'm interested in if NAIF or yourself as the Minister have discussed with any proponents or state governments any power stations or water infrastructure that would service either Adani or any of the other proposed Galilee Basin coal mines?
I'll take it on notice, particularly with just the proviso that obviously our ability to get information from the Queensland government may be limited. It's obviously they're not appearing here, but I'll take on notice with whatever information I can provide.
Thank you, Minister. Have there been any meetings held with Gemina, the proponents of the gas pipeline from Northern Territory to Queensland?
Well, I can't speak for NAIF. Is it a reference to NAIF?
Either with NAIF or yourself.
So I met with people from Gemina. It was before the election. I can take on notice the timing of that.
Thank you, and the general nature of the discussions. Thank you. Okay.
Just to be clear, that was before before the establishment of the NAIF. Well, sorry, no. Before I was in this particular role, before the election, but I was the Minister for Northern Australia at the time.
That's right. Yep.
And I believe it was before the establishment of the NAIF itself, and it was obviously a broad discussion about their project.
Okay. Chair, I've just got a few more questions on this NAIF issue, if you don't mind me continuing on. Thank you. So would the board take into account any designations by state governments of infrastructure projects being critical when making funding decisions? As you'd know, the Queensland government...
Repeat that, sorry.
Would the board take into account in their funding decisions any designations by state governments as critical infrastructure or state significant or some other kind of significance?
I think that goes to a level of
places
specifics that I can't answer for you. Again, we can take on notice, although what I can say is that under the mandate we provided to the NAIF, there are requirements on the NAIF to consult with state governments on any project they're seeking to fund, principally so that they could understand where such infrastructure might fit into state government priorities.
Yes, okay. Well, if you could also take on notice then whether or not such a designation, as has happened with Adani, would make it easier for projects to obtain funding under NAIF, given that they would have the imprimatur of the state. Okay, just on rejections of proposals, I understand that Section 11 of the Act says there's a few criteria on which a proposal can be rejected by the Minister. That's that veto that we were talking about before.
Yep.
And you flagged that it was adverse national or domestic security implications.
Yep.
Minister, have you formed a view on whether or not it's inconsistent with the objectives or policies of the Commonwealth Government or with national or domestic security implications for Adani to be financed under the NAIF?
No, I haven't formed a view on that, Senator Waters.
Okay.
And I would add, it's a hypothetical, obviously, at the moment.
Yeah. At what point in time would you need to decide under Section 11 whether to exercise that power?
Well, only in accordance with the requirements of the Act, which are triggered, of course, by a proposal by the board.
Okay, so much later on, once that board had made that investment recommendation.
Again, that's the generic situation, of course. The particular project you raise is a hypothetical situation, obviously.
Okay. So, Minister, given that there's been quite a bit of discussion in the press from folk from your political party about ruling out funding for Adani mine, are you, as Minister, able to confirm that statement that the Adani mine or any associated infrastructure would not receive NAIF funding?
Well, I've said before, Senator, that the mine itself wouldn't qualify, as I would see it, for the NAIF. That's not to say...
Would not qualify.
Would not qualify. That's not to say, of course, that I'm concluding under that section you mentioned that it's somehow not in the national interest or some such. But, of course, there are detailed requirements under the mandate we've given to the board about what type of investments we're seeking to fund with this.
Okay.
So any mine is not really in the conception of a government under this program. You raised the associated infrastructure.
Yes.
Well, that is a matter for the board now to consider. I don't have a particular view on it. except to say that the requirements we've set out in the mandate do talk about issues of the need for infrastructure or preference for infrastructure that has multiple users and provides a wider economic benefit. Obviously, we have those requirements to consult with the states, and almost more important than anything else, it's got to stack up, and well, it's got to both be a project which can work for the taxpayer. This is a loan scheme, not a grant scheme, but be something that we're providing additional or quicker investment in infrastructure for Northern Australia.
Okay. I'll put some questions in on notice about the loan versus grant scheme, but just one final question on NAIF. Would the decision about whether or not to issue a rejection notice, that veto Section 11 power, need to go to Cabinet, or would that be something that you as a minister would take on your own?
Well, under the Act, it's a power for the Minister. It'd be a matter for government to consider how we make those decisions.
So, sorry, does that mean it would go to Cabinet, or...?
Well, it would be a matter for government, and of course I would consult with my colleagues about the processes we'd put in place.
Okay.